Hey everybody, welcome to this week's What the Heck. We have a guest in their, waking hours actually this time instead of like, what was it, 3 a.m. last time?
About four or something like that, yeah.
Four. Uh,
It's nice to be
uh,
back in regular hours.
yeah, welcome to the Sunday edition of What the Heck. And as you know, it's probably going to be Sunday for the foreseeable future in the morning, my time, so that anybody can join if they want. Um, Yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself real quick? I'm like
Yeah,
clearly not awake yet because I don't drink coffee.
yeah. I'm icing. Alien Signal is the weird name I use when I play music. EMS regular at this point. Yeah, what more to say? Have this thing over here. Plays music with it once in a while. Do a kind of melodic disco-y thingy with
heck,
space.
heck yeah, space disco that never sleeps. It just constantly going. Hey, Forestine, enthusiastic electrons, Ben. How are you all doing? If anyone wants to jump in, I can send you the link and you can pop in. Um, we got we actually got some good stuff to talk about today.
Yeah.
First off, you had some questions for me about my Eurorack building ambitions, right?
Yeah. I was kind of just. I mean, it's really. It's. I was curious about the process thing because I mean, I started with this Eurorack thing early this year, and hi Kyle.
Hello.
And what I was kind of thinking is because you're kind of also starting in Eurorack now, but your perspective is much more different than mine because you have all the stuff just behind you there, all the Cosmo stuff. And I really hope
Yeah.
that you're gonna do less mistakes than I am. But I want to know what kind of process you're in there.
Well, I would say I've probably made the same mistakes, but a lot slower and more painful because I had to build my way through them versus like swapping modules or something. Like, it's really frustrating when you build a module and you're like super psyched about it and you start playing with it and you're like, I just spent 3 hours making this and like months waiting for parts, and now I actually don't like this module anymore. Those are hard mistakes.
Yeah.
Hey Kyle, can you do a quick intro for yourself?
Hello, does my sound okay?
Yeah, your sound's
Yeah,
great. Perfect.
cool. Yeah, I'm Kyle. I work for Signal Sounds in the UK, selling modular stuff to people.
Heck yeah. So you know everything about everything. Uh,
I don't know about that. There's a lot to know about. Like, there's too much stuff to actually know everything about everything. But yeah, I
right.
know
So,
I know certain stuff. Yeah.
right. Like I don't expect you to know like the deep menu diving or like hidden functions and like or shift functions and like the data bender or something you don't have. Like I don't know if you have data bender at all, but like I don't expect you to be a manual. Um,
Yeah,
but at a high level.
I kind of expected you to come in here, and I was kind of looking for that Christmas card that you sent with the first
Oh
package you
yeah.
sent me, and I had hoped could find it and just put it here. It would have been really nice. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it.
I
It's
still
it's
got some of
somewhere.
those. I've got some for this year.
Nice. But, so you're telling me I should order something from you
Well,
before Christmas?
look, no no business chat, but if you want to order something, I'll send you one. But yeah, I'm not here to push stuff today.
Yeah, this is not sponsored.
Right.
Non-promotional video. No paid don't
No, no,
demonetize
no,
us, even though we don't make any money on this.
no. But
YouTube.
encouraging stuff like this does help, right? Because we want people using Eurorack, and it should be
Yes.
fun. And this kind of stuff is fun. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I find Eurorack fun for like the right type of people, right? And there's different. I love Eurorack because it's like endlessly customizable. Like you can find the things that make you happy. Like if you want to spend 20 minutes to an hour dialing things in to get this like crazy generative patch that has all these sweet spots, sick. If you're like me and needs like really basic modules because I have a really basic brain, like also cool. Like there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. So I love it.
yeah.
Hey Alex. Everybody, like, there's more people on Sunday, I guess. Wednesday was a bad time. I apologize, everybody. Yeah, so, yeah, I have some Eurorack, right? Like, I have 64 HP available here, which has largely been taken up by mouse, which is on a shelf somewhere right now, I think, because the 2 HP were too big to fit without mass from going away. Anyway, so I had some Eurorack stuff, and I sort of treated that as like an augmenting what I had, like just find a few modules that I can't quite build on my own easily, and use
It's the
those.
same voltage range, right, between Eurorack and
Yeah, I
Cosmo.
mean, I'm using the same power supplies as
Right.
typical Eurorack. So that made it really easy, right? Like I just got somebody thankfully made this like cool Eurorack playset Cosmo adapter that's like this wide, and you bolt on the rails like this is probably the easiest Eurorack build you can do because the rails are attached via the same exact knurlies as the panels. Like it's super clever. So pro tip, if you want to build it, you can do it on a panel really easily like that. And behind it, I actually built a little bus board attached to the back end of it, so that it could have its own power switch, which I added. That was a rample issue. More likely a power supply issue on my end, but this fixed it, so it's fine.
So let me just ask you that stupid question that everybody asks people, newcomers in Eurorack. Do you have a plan? What's your plan with the stuff?
I have a plan, right? Like, step one, if you're going to do Eurorack, is get a filter, but I already have filters, so I'm good. Step two is actually build a case. And then 3 is get an oscillator or sound source. That's the correct order, in case you're wondering. But
Filter before oscillator?
yeah, filter first.
Okay.
Because it can, I mean, if you have the right filter, it can self-oscillate, but it's just a lot of fun. But I have this, I just got this like mega setup from Tragatronic for the power supply, which is like the biggest hurdle, I think, in building a case. Other than, like, it's not too hard to build wooden box roughly to the right directions and bolt some rails on. Like that's what I'm gonna do. I actually got the 9U side plates for the rails so that I don't have to think. Like it'll just be the right height for 9U. And then these power supplies are going to make me happy because one of my beefs about my current power supplies, well, I'll get to my current power supplies in a second, but these are pretty massive 5 amp 12 volt power supplies, and this will actually total 10 volt plus and minus plus no 10 amp on the plus rail, 10 amp on the minus rail, and split amongst a crap ton of these bus boards. So it should be overkill for what I'm doing, to the point where if I understand it when I build it enough, I'll probably split it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like maybe make a small case out of the spare stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I had to look at power supplies for this case here, and you get the choice when you buy new cases whether you want to go with the Dofer route, buy those super expensive Dofer power supplies, or you want to go with the Meanwell RT65Bs or whatever
Yeah,
they're called.
yeah,
And the math is basically so simple that you can just add so many of these Meanwells before you paid for one of the Dofer ones. So I just
yes.
went with as many as I could sort of fit in the case.
And yeah, and like I've got a pair of Meanwells outside that I plan to probably swap out my power supplies in one of these with. Like I'm going to try the Meanwell route and see how that goes. I can't imagine it's going to be noisier than whatever I have in there. Right now I have a bunch of FC UK power supplies, so Frequency Central UK, that are pretty basic, pretty straightforward. The problem is I ran into some issues that are non trivial and also not intuitive. Like one of the things that I thought was cool about them is you could put them, I think, in parallel. I can't even remember at this point, where you could have basically one wall wart per box if you have two power supplies in there, because they also act as bus boards. And I was running into an issue where they were just too noisy in that configuration for whatever reason. Like I tried a bunch of things. Then I started noticing a lot of people popping up on the forums saying like, yeah, they had to split them because they were a little noisy. So that was something I had to do. So now each of these big boxes has two wall warts per box, which drives me absolutely crazy because like
That's a lot of plugs.
yeah, and they're not like, it's a lot of plugs. It's a nightmare. So I think I am going to try the Meanwell because, like you said, you can sort of chain those up as
Yeah, I
much
mean,
as you're.
there was a
Yeah,
bit of sort of chatter on forums and stuff where people were complaining a little bit about them, and it turns out that these were some of the old models, as far as I can tell, and most people were decently happy with them, and I've certainly not discovered any issues with them.
yeah, they're pretty boss. Like I've heard good things. I think Robbie uses the Meanwells, and a bunch of several other like Cosmo builders have used them to the point where they're like, they've got so much extra amps available, they just like started adding LEDs and stuff for like no reason other than they had extra power
Right.
to play with. So I think the Meanwell RT65B is a pretty solid solution.
Yeah.
Um,
It's certainly widely used, so it must be.
I did not want to futz with that with Eurorack. Like I'm making a pretty good size Eurorack case, so I was like, all right, we'll try a paid option and see how that goes. Um, I'm still going to do the RT65, and if I like those, pretty much all the rest of my cases I'll convert to Meanwells, and then I'll use the FCU. I'll either sell the FCUK power supplies or make like a handful of like lunchbox Eurorack cases, similar to what Enthusiastic Electrons has done, because I think those are super cool.
Yeah. I got one of these recently, one of the small 4MS pots.
Yeah,
Basically, I needed a place to have my Hermod, and they couldn't fit it in my rack, so now it's in one of these. And they're not very expensive, so that was the solution. I don't
yeah,
want to have too
that's
many of them, but I like sort of have that you have that possibility of having a few small cases with modules where it makes sense.
yeah. Kyle, I'm interested from your perspective as somebody who's working for a retailer that sells modular. Like, what are things folks typically struggle on when they're starting out that you hear about more?
I mean, yeah, it depends where the customer's coming from. Um, Often, I mean, some people are happier with doing a bit of DIY stuff, other people just don't want anything to do with it. You know, we like. I would always recommend, kind of unless you don't have to ask the questions, don't mess around with building your own power supply because
I
it's
would,
just,
yeah.
like it's just not worth it. Like even like the meanwhile things you've got to wire up mains into, right?
Yes, that one
Yeah,
scares the crap out of me, which is why it's still
yeah,
sitting on my
and it's
workbench.
like it's not it's not difficult, but you should be confident in doing that before you know just make sure everything's unplugged. Just take your time and like, but yeah, like um, I think almost all the cases we sell are powered now, just for ease of issues, And also, I think if you're buying a case, it's an expensive thing already, and
Yeah.
if you had to buy another thing, it's just kind of a bit of a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, that's kind of a
Um,
bummer because like power feels like, uh, I guess to most consumers at this point, like it if it doesn't come with power, like what are you selling?
yeah,
like you're selling me a box, but like okay, yeah, a lot of work goes into it, and they're not like mass produced typically. And well, to the extent
It's
of
probably more the
like,
latter issue actually, because
yeah,
I mean, if you mass produce them, they're pretty damn cheap, I think.
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
The other issue with cases is um, they're big, they can be quite heavy, and there's like a lot of air in a case, right?
yeah, yeah,
So if you want to make 50 cases and ship them across the world, that's extremely, extremely expensive to do.
right,
And there's
huge
not that
box.
much, yeah, there's not that much as much money in it. Whereas, a module can sell for 600 quid
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah,
It's a box this size, it costs 20 quid to send across the world. So that's a big thing people don't realize. So when
yeah,
we get Mantis cases from Tip Top, we got 50 sent to us, um, in a cargo container, basically, because it's the only way that makes sense to do it financially. So
right.
otherwise, it's too expensive to send. Um, yeah, so that's something people don't consider. And I would always encourage people to build their own case if they feel up for it. Because, like you said, it's a box, and especially if you get the brackets for the rails, then the spacing's done for you. All you have to do is screw them in. Even just side cheeks, just put 2 bits of oil in the end to raise it up a bit, and that is like, it's fine.
Yeah, and like there's ways around that. Like you can even like I don't know, get a wider module or a pair of modules, bolt them onto the rails, and then like put those on a couple of 2x4s or something, right? Like it
Yeah,
doesn't take much. Like I think Enthusiastic Electrons has a couple of those. You really just need something to hold the rails and the power supply in
yeah,
place.
exactly.
Uh, and those side plates, I mean, I haven't tried them yet, but I'm really excited at the prospect because one of the things that I liked the least about making a case is sort of measuring not just the dimensions, but like these are all wooden rails, so I had to sort of like measure the width the
Yeah,
wooden rails needed to be and like where they sit in the case and
Mm.
all of that. And it's not. I can tell you, it's not good. It's
yeah.
horrible.
It's also you can't, or it's very difficult to undrill a hole, right? And
Yeah,
once you've drilled that hole, if you need to move it half a centimeter up or down, you're then yeah, it doesn't work. So you need to then
yeah.
fill that with a dowel or something and then drill it again. It's just a pain.
Right, I
Yeah.
have specific modules that have like there. It was before like some of the Cosmo PCBs started getting a little more standardized and like recommended sizes. Like the inside PCB on a couple of them are so tall that those are the ones I used to measure with. That made it really like crucial to get it right on the first try.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, having some blank panels that you just screw in are fine
yep,
for spacing. That works.
yeah, that works
Mhm.
for Eurorack. I'm really stoked about all the screws being in the same, or screw holes being in the same spot on Eurorack panels, or at least
Mm.
close enough to the same spot. And in Cosmo, that's not always the case, which is why
Uh,
I don't have metal rails, especially on the first couple boxes, because again, that wasn't standardized. Some of these modules have been remade since I built them, where they actually have a more standardized location, so I could build rails on a future one. But like this filter up here, the screw holes are just a little bit down and in compared to everything else. So
mhm. Well,
that would
nice thing about Eurorack is you can
yeah,
go to the Dopefor website
yep,
and the whole thing is laid out there.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah,
case
but the
sizing,
units are
hole
super
spacing.
annoying,
Yeah,
especially if you have to go on
uh,
the HP scale. It's
yeah.
just
Well, also, so dope for HP are like rounded up or down as well,
mm, they
right?
are.
So, 8 HP isn't 8 times 5.08 millimeters. It's that
No.
plus a little bit or minus a little bit to make it fit squarely. But like, just
Yeah. Yeah.
have some 1 HP blanks as well, and then you can fill in those spaces if you're worried about that. But
It's like somebody took a imperial standard and tried to fit it into metric and gave up
yeah,
halfway.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Like,
Eurorack is such a like Cosmo is great. Like there was a discussion about like what's 1 HP in Cosmo, and people were like,
mm,
"That's dumb." It's like
mm,
everything's in even centimeters. Like a panel is 20 centimeters tall, easy
Mm,
peasy.
yeah,
Like they tend to
yeah.
be increments of 2.5 centimeters wide, like
mm,
5, 10, 15, all that. So
yeah.
really easy.
I think that's quite a nice thing that um, you're less worried about spacing for parts in Cosmo, I guess. I guess
Hmm.
same with kind of the 5U stuff,
Hmm.
like you're accepting you're gonna have a big panel, so
Yeah,
you're not worried about squeezing loads of stuff in quite a
yeah,
small size.
and like you can't like uh, I can't some folks have a lot of modules and they're constantly swapping out modules. I can't really do that because I have to build every module for Cosmo.
Mm,
Like there's no I've never seen a built Cosmo module for sale. I'm sure it's happened, but yeah. So like
Mm,
there's no need for me to worry about that, like squeezing as many modules in as possible. Like I still do that to an extent, but it's usually like how can I get a couple more VCAs or whatever in, or um, I might actually swap it. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple modules I'm looking at building, replacing, but yeah, it's not a huge issue.
mm.
Um, and I wouldn't want to swap out on my. You know what? Swapping is not as bad as I thought for Steam because I've rearranged both cases a couple of times now, and including the top case, and things mostly line up. And there's some tricks I do. So like on modules smaller than 5 centimeters and smaller, sometimes even the 10 centimeter ones. It sort of depends. I will only screw in the top or the bottom left and the top right screw, right? Like instead of all four corners. And that means there's like no holes here, which sort of gives me a little leeway when I put another panel in if it doesn't quite line up. The problem is when you have a screw hole that's like 2 millimeters left or right of where the screw hole needs to be, then you have to sort of fill it in, or it'll either break the panel or not fit. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the uneven panel problem in Eurorack as well, right? I have
Yeah.
a lot of those Ericasynth Pico modules which are 3 HP, which is an annoying number because you need to have then two of them in order to fill up an even number of HPs, not to end up with a 1 HP space somewhere in your rack. I have like a couple of those 1 HP blanks just lying around in my case now just to make everything fit up.
I will say this: the wooden rails made me really, really plan out my case and where I wanted the signal chain to go. Um,
Hmm.
I had a lot of time to plan it out because I was building all the modules. So that I learned a lot during that because you get like one shot to do it right, and then you can't like it's not easy enough to like I can't shift like it'd be hard to shift things like 2.5 centimeters to the right or something like
Hmm.
that, right? So I really planned that out, and that made looking at Eurorack like significantly easier because I already have an idea in my mind of what I
Hmm.
expect and what I want with this new case.
But
Um,
your new case, is that supposed to work on its own next to the Cosmo or together with the Cosmo or a little bit of both or
Both, yeah. So
both?
what I
Yeah.
want to do, I mean, I ultimately want a. I love all of this stuff, but I don't want to bring it with me if I want to
Hmm.
go somewhere and play live, right? Like,
Sure.
um, there was something luxurious about Robbie showing up in a hallway with a box and being able to play
Yeah.
sick, like whatever, all sorts of cool stuff, right?
I
Like
wrote
that's
myself
amazing.
out of that as well with this thing. I'm not going to transport that anyway.
And like I can transport these, like that I'm okay with.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I built them to be pretty durable. I think the only thing that would be like sticking out from the edge is the door stopper, and it's a door stopper, so not
Right.
worried about breaking that. But for the other case, like I plan it for it to have like probably a significant portion of one of the rows is going to be sequencers and mixers, right? Like I don't need a ton, but it would be good to have a good sort of end of
You
chain mixer
always
that can
need
go
more
out
than
to
you
PA.
think.
Right.
It's I mean it's a nightmare for me. I wanna try all the sequences and I want to have them all in at the same time. I also want space for other modules. Sequences are expensive. They take a lot of HP. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
Basically,
So,
when you make a decision around a sequencer, you're kind of stuck with it for at least for a
well,
while.
thankfully, I've tried a fair amount of sequencers and different types. I have a pretty good idea of what I'm looking for. The trick is going to be sort of um, being okay with some limitations. Like right
Hmm.
now, I have very few limitations with the pyramid, but I'm okay with some limitations. It's fine. The I think I want to split up my sequencing from like synth and drums and like two different sequencers,
Hmm.
and like a mixer to like do some mutes and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
um, beyond that, like I'm not going to start with those modules at all. Those are going to be like later on when if I
Hmm.
decide I really like Eurorack and go all in, then it's
Yeah.
game on. But um, I'm gonna start with some things that I don't have, right? Like I've
Hmm.
got I've got a fair amount of oscillators, like I've got a good drone, like I've got a good amount of bass right here that I don't need to duplicate right away. So I'm gonna start with some of the modules that augment what I have.
Yeah.
So things that
I
I can't easily get or build on my own that are
I
available in
think that
Eurorack that
makes
I
a
think are
lot of
pretty cool.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So it'll start out like that, and then as I progress down the wallet burning path, I'll start getting into the sequencers and things like
Hmm.
that. And,
Hmm.
and I'll probably get some more oscillators and sound sources and filters. Of course, probably should start with filters actually, but you know.
Yeah.
uh,
No, I mean, I joined Robbie in the Church of the Black Sequencer of America Synth recently. Been really enjoying it. Um, and I wanted to sell the Hermit until I got the Polycinematic because that is so nice with MIDI.
uh,
And suddenly my Hermit became my MIDI recording device. I mean, there are other MIDI recording devices available, but I had that one, and it sort of does that trick at least. So
I
now it's
love
yeah.
MIDI. I don't love setting it up, and I don't love debugging weird MIDI stuff, but I do like the Queen of Pentacles is a sick module that if it had MIDI, I would own it right now. It would replace
Hmm.
whatever's in there. It would be my drum machine, right? Like
Right.
it's a sick module. All I want to do is pop like a MIDI through out of something, pop it in, and like my all my drum triggers are taken care of, right? Like I can just set a channel or whatever, that
Yeah.
kind
You
of
can
thing.
probably DIY that quite easily, right?
Yeah,
A little breakout box that takes MIDI in and spits out 5 triggers.
yeah. I
You can
mean,
do
what I
that.
would do is like one of the first modules I will. I mean, I'm also looking at drum modules as some of the first modules I get as well. So some of like the WMD modules and like noise engineering has a cool one, a couple cool ones I'm looking at. But I'm looking at a MIDI to trigger module. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the app. Yeah.
The
So,
sample.
yep, the sample. Yeah. So, like, I mean, I have the rample for that similar functionality that I love, but uh, uh, I'll probably start with the MIDI to trigger is what I'm getting to, so that I can handle that a little more gracefully. And that also would mean when I do have that MIDI to trigger next to like the I don't know WMD Metron or something, right? It would be easy to just like reroute a couple of those wires from the MIDI to the sequencer and be ready to go live, that kind of thing. Um, MIDI
I'm
is
super
heresy.
frustrated with drum modules, not in general, but maybe more just the selection I have. And I'm also sort of annoyed that it takes so much rack space to have a proper drum kit, unless you go that sample road. I
Yeah,
mean, basically, I have the Erica Black bass drum, and then I have two of those Pico drum modules. and that gives me
Yeah.
five sounds, which is still not enough. I feel.
Yeah, what I mean, I found like the drum root impact is an
Mm.
amazing machine. It
Mhm.
is like my go-to drums for almost everything, and it unfortunately there's not really like a good Eurorack equivalent in my mind.
No.
Like it could be massive, and I would still go for it. Um, but that plus the Rample has been a nice combination of drum sounds, and
Yeah.
like the Rample can do like any sampling, but um, just like the Squid sample, like you can augment what you want for a track with your sampler pretty easily. So
Mhm.
Mm.
that has been really satisfying. So I think what I'll probably do is like build my own version of this with some modules that give me some nice performability. Yeah, it's going to be like probably just as wide as that, but in Eurorack format. But that plus the Rample does it for me pretty nicely.
Mm.
Um, oh yeah, the Erica Pico drum too.
The
Robbie
two
mentioned.
is the no sample version, right? But that only has one sound, if I remember correctly. It's one trigger, one beat.
I do not know enough about it. Um, but
Mm.
I can say I'm only looking for one sound per module for the most part. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not actually looking at the Queen of Pentacles yet, even though that is a really boss module and does sort of what I want. I'm actually
Mm.
looking at sort of one module per sound because I really like. I mean, the three core things I care about are obviously kick and snare and like a hat of some sort. And
Mm.
sometimes the snare and hats can be the same module, but um, those are the things I think have the biggest impact on my sound. So I want those to be very like performable. Like I really love that I can like sweep through like get a huge range of sound from just one,
Mhm.
one sh- trigger.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. I think for my part, it's also some of it comes down to the fact that I'm not very good at programming drums. I have had to
Mhm.
realize. Yeah, so that's probably a lot more to be gained from the modules. I was in a state where I was really wondering why my bass drum was sounding really crappy, and then I just opened up the Erica Synth tutorial video for it and just copied the settings, and suddenly it sounded fine. So there's a
That's
certain
awesome.
aspect of just becoming better at the stuff you have, for me at least.
Yeah, for sure, and that's something that I'm always learning.
Mm.
Kyle, do you mess with drum modules a bit?
A bit, yeah. I've got to be honest. I'm not a massive fan of like synthesized, like you know, electronic analog drum sounds.
Yeah.
Mostly because I've been playing drums since I was 10, like acoustic drums, and
Yes.
it sounds weird to me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a lot of electronic music with drums in it, but that's why I prefer the sample with
Right. Look, well,
built in.
Right.
yeah. Go
You
ahead.
know, the same. I kind of feel the same thing with the drum programming, right? You tend to be very much tied into 16-step thing,
Yeah.
but then I go, well, my brain's playing acoustic drums, and I can't punch that in, because I would just, I would just do it. It's just like, you know,
Yeah.
um, muscle memory. But then when you go to punch it in, it doesn't. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that big time. Like, there's definitely one addressing the sound. I don't think any of the sort of synthesized drums sound anything like any drum. Like maybe a hat if you squint your eyes, but like
Yeah.
not really, right? It sounds like,
Mm.
especially the kick drums, it sounds like a synth with a transient, right?
Yeah.
Like with a good filter or something. Um, so I'm with you on that aspect. And then the hits on snares, like unless it's like even the sample snares hit harder than any of these snares hit.
Yeah.
Period.
The other thing is like drums you hear in music, whether that be acoustic or electronic,
Yeah,
they've gone through so much stuff
yeah,
since the sound source that
yeah.
you go, why don't my drums sound good? Like, why don't they sound like Daft Punk? It's because they've gone through like loads of compressors and EQs and and
Yeah.
whatnot to make it, really punchy. Which
Yeah.
you can do that in your rack, but you need compressors and EQs and stuff.
Yeah.
And frankly, you're probably better doing that in a DAW, recording and then doing your
Or
final
with a
mix in a DAW.
ton of expensive rack mounted equipment that you don't
Yeah,
have access
sure.
to
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who
No, but
uses rack
I
mount stuff
think
these days?
there's sort of the same problem with drum sequencing as regular sequencing in Eurorack, that if you're just doing sequencing, just laying it out on the grid, you're sort of not really doing what you can do with Eurorack, because you have all these powers of probability,
Yeah.
randomness, weird stuff into things that weren't meant to get this kind of signal, but for some reason it works anyway. It's something I've started to struggle a little bit with, and at a certain point was really horrible at, because there is a certain balance between random and control in your rack that's really hard to get, especially in your composition of your rack. I ended up at some point with nothing that was random at all, and it just became really hard to sort of jam around, because everything had to be programmed in. I could sort of open close a filter myself, but that doesn't make it very interesting, and that doesn't use Eurorack for what you can do with Eurorack, or modular for that matter. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be Eurorack. I think just that balance is super hard to get.
Yeah.
What I would
So
like to see is like those the circuit videos where the people that or even the push, I think it's push or whatever the Ableton Live,
Yeah.
yeah, the push,
yeah.
the people that do the finger drumming like perfectly, or like whole tracks sick finger drumming. I think those, like, somebody who's really good at that, with that jacked into some Eurorack, could do some really interesting things that gets you some of that feel that you can't.
Mm,
Like when I put that 16 step sequence in, like it's locked in. I'm like, yeah, I can, on my sampler, on my sequencer, I can have multiple sequences and swap them out to, a different 64 step or whatever the thing is. But that's not the same as like, when you feel like stopping, like doing a quick mute every once in a while, or like doing a fill. Like those things are a lot harder to do because you have to
Oh yes.
program them.
yeah.
Yeah, they really are. My approach to programming for a long time has just been to open up this PDF I have with like drum patterns, and I go like, oh, do I feel like Cuban dance hall today, or something something, and I try to program that in, and find that doesn't really work with the stuff I have
Mm,
going in my rack, and then I sort of go by ear instead. But it's as I say, I mean, there needs to be expression and fills and variants and all that.
yeah.
It's hard. It's hard sometimes,
Yeah.
especially with some of the cheaper sequences. Like I've had the LL8 I have from Robo here is not meant to be doing much. I mean, it has 16 steps in total, and you can sort of chain a couple of patterns together, but that doesn't really give you what you're talking about there, right?
Yeah. So clock dividers, everyone should have one.
What?
A clock divider,
Yeah.
Clock divider, yeah.
everyone
Yep.
should have one, or two, or three. Sample and holds, and switches. Those
Now,
things.
now,
Will,
why? Like, I assume clock dividers
well,
because you can set them up as like triggers, and it's really easy to get 4 to the floor by just like plug them in, or 16 notes on some,
yeah.
snare,
But
hi
some of
hat
them
or
also
something.
do like triplets and stuff as well, right? Or not,
Yeah,
not not powers of two things as
yeah,
well, which
yeah,
can be really good, right?
yeah,
Um, and then so sure you can go clock divider straight into your sounds, which will give you like a pattern.
yeah,
But then if you either stick some of that through a switch or a VCA to turn it on and off, or send it to different sounds, you can just like massively open up the patterns you can do. Um, people tend to underestimate that with sequencing sequencers. I've got my sequencer, it does its thing, I plug it into the sound, and there I go,
yeah,
right? But you can do like with like the mutable links or kinks. One of them's got like the sample and hold thing in it. With that, you can do like a whole separate line, right? If you clock it at half the speed, you know, same CV, different
yeah,
gates, right?
yeah,
It holds the note for double the amount of time underneath your main melody. There's loads of tricks like that people tend to not play with. They go, if I can't do it on my sequencer, I can't do it. But you can get really cheap dope for things that will just like massively expand.
And
What you
if
can
your
do.
clock, like, I guess some clock dividers do, have their own clock as well. Like if you've got a single clock source, you can even clock your sequence with those divided clocks. So you can get some really
Yeah, yeah,
funky rhythms that way, which is kind of cool.
yeah. You could
Um,
do. I mean, it's like it's such a classic thing in a lot of metal that a lot of music and metal, right? That during a middle eight you go to half time.
yeah.
You know, you can
Yeah.
do that with a clock divider and a switch.
Yes.
Suddenly you're going from your 120 down to your 60, and suddenly you're in half time, and then you can go back up again.
And that was
Um,
actually something I wanted to try with this. Like I realized the other night, just thinking about changing tempos. I think Benjamin had mentioned like quantizing my change, like slowing down or speeding up my tempo. But like I think I can actually basically create a track on this sequencer that is. I mean, I just dedicate it to changing the speed so that if I
mm,
like hit play on one sequence on it, it'll instantly change the tempo to whatever 80 ppm or half or whatever. Or if I hit the other sequence, it can go back up to full speed. So I think I'm going to try some of that
yeah,
stuff at some point. It'd be
I,
fun.
I'll need to try and find this video, but I saw a really good modular performance where it almost felt like the player was kind of like zooming in like a microscope onto his track. Is that makes any kind of sense? Like he was constantly getting
Right. You
smaller
slow
and
down
smaller
and
and
you can
smaller
hear
bits.
the
But then,
the
but then when you see
definition.
the whole picture, it looks right, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And it always sounded good. It sounded like you were kind of speeding up, but it didn't really speed up. It just sounded like more intense. I'll see if I can find it and post it.
That's cool.
He's like just purely playing with time rather than playing with melody as such. You know?
There's also like some like there's an Aphex Twin track I liked a couple years ago that was like Collapse or something like that. But the interesting part of the track is that I think there's actually like a slowed down BPM as part of the sequence. So
Mm.
almost like a ball bouncing effect, right? Like I forget what that's called, but almost like one of those modules that sort of
Yeah.
has that ball bounce trigger, where the tempo actually slows down and then speeds up halfway through a sequence. Like it's every sequence. Like it's pretty cool. So it'd be fun to try some more stuff like that. And you like physically feel it when you.
Yeah. Maths can do that, I believe. Maths has a
Yes.
bouncing ball patch.
Yes.
I've done it before, but I'd have to look up how to do it exactly.
There's actually
Um,
a bouncing
yeah.
ball Cosmo module that I have yet
Oh,
to
yeah.
build, but that'd be a fun one too.
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I saw
I'm
an
just checking.
art performance once some years ago where the guy was playing guitars next to a drum machine, and the drum machine tempo was sort of wonky and went out of sync all the time, and just slowed down a lot and speeded up quickly like that. And it was a mindfuck to watch that. It was really it freaked me out.
You know what kills me is I don't know what happened, but I think on one of my streams, I think it was I don't know if it was the pyramid or what, but I could hear on the stream when I was listening back like the tempo slow down like I don't know 2 BPM, maybe 1 BPM, but
Mm.
enough for you like
Yeah.
just weird feeling, you know, like it's
Right.
Yeah.
The
uh,
Moskva that I have here has a rate knob, which is basically a clock divider, but it's stepless. So if you don't hit exactly the division you want, it can sort of be a little bit off.
oh.
That's super
That's cool.
frustrating.
Yeah. Well,
Kyle,
that's the
you
thing.
mentioned sample to hold as well. Like, what would you use those for in terms of
Oh,
drum sequencing?
all kinds of things. Like the thing is, you need to. Um, it's very easy to get a module and think it does this thing, but you need to go like to like a lower level and just think about you know what it does with the voltages, and then
Right.
it opens up these things. That's something that a lot of people again don't think about. I mean, the voltage thing is like a lot of people just don't want to worry about that at all. Like that's 5 volts, that's eight
That's me.
volts going down. Right, sure,
Yeah.
and that's great. But if you're almost like Neo in the Matrix, when you just start seeing the Matrix, you start seeing things like that. It's just you just see all the code, and you're like, whoa, it opens up a lot of different things.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a skill, right? For me, that
yeah.
feels like a skill. It's something you need to understand. And there's this thread on Modwiggler where it's about you don't have this module, you need it, but you have some other modules. How do you get that effect? And it's like it's really mind blowing what you can do sort of with basic building blocks that you might already have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some modules like are a lot more flexible. Like I don't know why, but oscillators are like my jam. Like I know them in and out at this point, but like you put the right control voltage in, your oscillator could be an LFO all of a sudden, right? Like it may go lower than you put, like things like that. Like you can push things much further, like than the panel might allow you, or that you might predict typically. Like if I put like on my triple splashback, if I put in CV that goes really low, um, the time can stretch to like a minute and a half or something, and it's not good sounding, but it can do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also oscillators as modulation is
Yeah.
another thing people should do more. I mean, that's basically the whole principle behind complex oscillators, right? You get
Mhm.
two together, and then you do they're wired inside, and you do weird things. It
Yeah,
doesn't, it
and I
doesn't have to be wired inside. You can do it with any two oscillators.
yeah, I mean even one I mean, one of my favorite things to do, and I almost always have this perma patch to this point where I take yeah, in this case, the saw wave out of the oscillator, because I have multiple. A lot of oscillators have the like the square wave saw
Mhm.
and sine or triangle out at the same time, and I'll pipe that into the filter, like into an attenuator of the filter, and like if you crank that up, you can get some really cool sounds like that, or even like there's much more you can do with that, or like pipe it into another oscillator or sync or something like
Yeah.
that. But
And
it's pretty cool.
you can mix all those waveforms as well, right? That's like
Yeah.
a 101 does that, or there's a few classic synths do that. You know, you've got your oscillator and then your waveform mixer.
Yes.
Mm.
You don't have quite a square wave. It's a square wave with a weird
Right.
triangle point
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah,
A
And you
lot of
can.
synths have that, I think. I
yeah,
think my
quite a few.
buried Neutron had that thing where you can select which and mix a little bit together
Mm.
with the waveforms.
It makes
I
sense to do it on a fixed architecture thing, right? Because
no, I tried to do that actually on
mm,
the last patch. Took three of the four waveform out of my sort of. I have this Dover standard VCO. I
mm,
plugged it into both to three individual VCA channels, and I have this summing VCA. So I just connected the envelope to the sort of sum out, and just then I could sort of adjust how much of each waveform I wanted.
yeah,
It
and that
wasn't
can give you
exactly how I imagined it would sound,
it
but
can
it's
give you like kind of FM or PWM sounding sounds, but you know
mm,
it's still staying in pitch the way you
Yep.
want it to. You're not changing the pitch at all. You're just changing the shape, and it sounds kind of weird if you know if you can fade between those things.
And you can modulate like anything with audio, right? Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes really unexpected. Like another one of the other weird things that I had set up recently, I think it's still set up, is with one of my voices. I took the so in the same voice that has like a square wave, typical square wave lead sound, I took the triangle out, went into an attenuverter, and then back into the filter from there. And the attenuverter, when I invert that, it almost does like a phase cancellation thing, and you get this like really lo-fi, almost like video game Atari sound out of
Yeah.
it. So like you can do a lot.
Yeah, that's another one. It's just attenuators and offsets.
yeah,
Have some of those because you need to be able to move. Sometimes you need to be able to move these things around to get them to talk nicely
Yep.
to each other. You
Yep.
know, or you can do the classic inverted envelope compressor trick and all those kind of
yeah,
things.
I think the
Um,
attenuverter is like my go-to sound exploration device, where like I want to test something and like be able to
mm,
go full range.
yeah.
So
yeah.
that's pretty rad.
Or
I
another good
got
trick you
one
can
with
do. Sorry.
with eight outputs, and I'm using it all the time. It's almost always half filled, if not more.
Yeah. A good thing you can do with offsets as well is you can use them as a macro control,
Mm.
right? Just mop that out to loads of things, and you've got like a thing that's doing filter and reverb and whatever all at the same time.
Yeah,
It's really good for performance stuff.
Yep.
yeah. Generally, just a fixed offset is super handy to
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
I do have. Oh, I guess it's not in there right now. I had another offset module for Cosmo that I was interesting, but I never got the feel for. And I've seen these pop up in Eurorack quite a lot recently, where it's both an attenuverter and then it's usually a handful of attenuverters or something in some sort of master knob that controls all of them at the same time, and it's just super funky, like and unpredictable. I did not use that as much as like they were just a basic attenuverter.
Yeah.
And it's a good module. I wasn't like turning it would like it wasn't flaky or anything. It's just I like if sometimes things, you know, when one set of values goes up and the other one goes down, it's hard to like predict how that might sound. I don't know. Yeah. What else? Yeah, attenuverters, unsung heroes. Another thing we sort of talked about a little bit before the stream started is perma patches, because this is starting to get into like perma patch territory a little bit with some of these things. But it's always fun to see like on DivKid's Discord or even EMS, like folks. There's a very clear divide between like I always unpatch and I just leave mine in for 6 months or whatever, like types of people. And I think there's more of a, I don't know, it feels like there's more of a stigma like in terms of perma patches, but
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. Like you've had yours on for like what, a week now or something?
Yeah,
I think.
most likely. I mean, not this week, but I usually have my rack turned on for like a week at a time, because then when I'm working from home, I can just get up, do a little bit on the patch, and realize, well, I don't have time to do anything more, but I can continue the day after. And especially with the pico drums, they don't save properly when I turn off the rack, so I kind of wanted to keep going the day after. And also, I'm getting into this nice origami of cable management I've going over here. It doesn't look as nice from this distance, but I can tell you it's nice to work with, because I've got all the cables out of the way. So unpatching is a serious job. Repatching is an even more serious job, because it takes a while. But I really enjoyed the process. I'm still trying to sort of get into that rhythm where I build a patch and I play a patch, I stream a patch on EMS or wherever. Well, on EMS, there's no other places. And then eventually I'll dismantle the patch and start over. I still find it to be a really sort of almost therapeutic experience to do it from scratch.
Yeah. What about you, Kyle? Are you a perma patch or a church of unpatching?
I would not be able to permapatch, because I mean I basically don't even have a permanent rack, really. It's changing like weekly, basically, with new stuff that I'm trying out or beta testing stuff for people. So yeah, it's constantly changing. I think permapatching, well, we're not talking permapatching, right? It's like
right. It's not like in there.
You're not gluing them to the rack.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for it, in that it will help you. You're going to really learn it as an instrument, right? Especially if you're doing live stuff or you're doing an album or something like that, right? Makes sense to build your instrument and then get the most out of it, and then you can, after that project's done, you can unpatch and try something new.
Yep.
I always unpatch, more or less, mostly because I've normally forgotten what I was doing. I come back to it and I'm like, oh yeah, what was that? So just pull everything out and then go again. But
that is 100% fair. Like my analog to that is like this bit ranger, right, or like the soft pop. Like, but when I'm done with playing, next time I turn it on, I have no idea what I was doing, not even a slightest clue. So I always unpatch those.
Yeah, size is the other thing as well, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm always using a fairly small case, but if you're using like a massive 3000 HP thing, you don't want to do that.
I mean, even if you are, there's just some things you don't need to unpatch, right? Like Enthusiastic Electrons leaves the line out patched, right? Like the kind of thing, like your clock divider is probably not gonna, like your clock signal is probably not gonna change all that much, or like.
I don't know. I think there's something to be said for that. Just like, because the flip side is you can get stuck in these ways of working,
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
and you're not getting the most out of everything you have.
Yeah.
Right.
Necessarily.
I
I mean,
was
that
considering
is
sort of
fine, but,
doing a standard patch, like, well, this channel on the sequencer would always go to this oscillator and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I suddenly discovered that I forgot to see what other settings were on that oscillator. For example, I have one of them is Platts. I was like, oh right, Platts has other sounds than this, but I forgot about it because it's just wired this way now, and the sound design is sort of done because it's an instrument now. It's not a modular thing anymore.
Right.
yeah.
Right. The way I look at it is like there's nothing. I have no objections to leave. Like I don't even care if I leave my patch in for 2 months. Like that doesn't bother me at all. Right. Like the way I look at it is, like if I want to go play guitar, right? Like I don't unstring my guitar every single time I finish playing, and I don't have to restring it every time I start, or I would never pick it up ever. Right. Like sometimes you just want to go play whatever your thing is quickly, right? Like I just want to turn it on and make some noise. But there are definitely days where, usually like on a weekend where I have more time, where I'm like, yeah, let's like rip out all the cables and make a new patch. Like that's
Yep.
okay. Like I do it on the same day. Like
so I think there's an interesting distinction here, these sort of syntactical, that whoever, I mean, there's a difference between ending your patch performance and then taking all the cables out and then leaving your modular blank for the next time,
yeah,
or sort of having the process where you take off all the patch cables and then repatch as part of
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
performance experience, right?
yeah. Well, it's
Because I
less
absolutely
performative
feel you
when
on
I
that
do it.
part.
It's usually just like start at the top and start pulling things out until things start falling to the ground. Um, but there's also like forced unpatching that I have to do every once in a while. Like if like I have to change the heater's filter every few months. I actually have to completely unpatch to move all of these things out of the way, or I can't get the filter out or in. So I have got some incentive to unpatch at least every few months.
Yeah.
Due to logistics.
Yeah. It's good to depatch sometimes and just like take a step back. Maybe even move things around if you can, because that will
Right.
change how you use it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving your stuff around makes a huge difference. I say that being
Yeah.
Cosmo, and I don't move my stuff around too much in the modules there, but like I just rearranged my stuff over here, and like all of a sudden I'm playing things more that I hadn't, because they were hard to reach before, that kind of stuff.
I mean, people will often do the whole, sequencer, oscillator, filter, VCA effects output thing. That's great. That's it's worked for a long time, right? But you don't have to do that. You can go sequencer into a delay, then out of the delay into
Yep.
your oscillator. Then
Yep.
you can use your effects as modulation sources. You don't have to be end of chain
Right.
uses.
Yeah.
Again, it depends what you want to do, right? What kind of sounds you're into. Like I've had a great time with some things, just like loads of stuff, loads of feedback and cross modulation, and just tweaking things the tiniest amount to get like screaming horrible noise. And that was great fun for like a couple of hours, and then I'm like, that's done now.
Yeah.
Take that
Yeah.
apart. And then you can do some ambient stuff, or you can do some techno stuff, because I'm not like most cases we'll be able to do a big variety of stuff,
Yeah.
right?
You
You can
can
design
do-
it as a techno thing, but it'll be able to do ambient if
Yes.
you want. If it's got a
Yeah.
reverb, you can do ambient pretty much, right?
Oh yeah, you just need a delay or reverb, or a few delays. But yeah, like hey, too slow. I was trying to make you big.
Just for
All right. Like and subscribe. Ring that bell if you want to see more of this.
He's not very happy with that.
Yeah, one of the things I do like doing every once in a while when I unpatch is like, let's make an ambient machine today. Like, this is completely divorce any idea of my permapatch and like try some new stuff. Or like my favorite is make your whole rack into a drum machine. Like that's a fun thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, that's a good way to like A, play with drum sequencing, and B, like get a better understanding of how to manipulate drums or create drum sounds. So if you haven't done that, highly recommend it.
I think I would recommend doing, if you feel up for it, is trying to um, do a cover almost, either a cover of like some music you like, or
Ooh,
try and do like clapping music or like some other Steve Reich weirdness,
yeah,
or like some music concrete stuff, because that'll really teach you how to use your stuff. You know, I had to do like I did a video on how to do clapping music with clouds. Use clouds essentially as a delay, and then you like shift to position back to shift the bars back. But doing that kind of problem solving with what you have will help you like learn. You know,
yeah, that's rad.
Gotta
uh,
try the drum machine thing
drum
when I
machine
get the
It's
thing.
time.
Yeah.
it's fun. I mean, it's really fun. Like I got that bug a few times. One was like over, I want to say like in the spring or sometime. I was really lusting after the drummer from Another Mother, which I still kind of want to play with. But I was like, well, I guess I can just make one. Um, let's do that. So that's it's really fun to make your own version of something like that.
Yeah. These they're all made up of like simple parts, right?
Yeah,
There's only actually like 20 things
right.
that the stuff does, right? Maybe less than that, you know?
It's like a
Um,
handful outside of like some of the more digital complex things. Yeah,
yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, if it's DSP, that's kind of a different
yeah,
world, but you know, yeah, a lot of if it's analog, it's only a few bits really, just wired up in different ways.
yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah, so we're at the hour. I think it'd be good to cut it here because I got some choring to do today.
mm.
Hmm.
uh, Isaac, do you want to play us out?
Oh God, you're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah,
I didn't have anything prepared,
You
but
don't
I
have
could.
to. Like, I mean, you could just make one sound and I'd be
I could
fine.
do.
But
I can probably do something from space in what? How long do I have? 3 minutes? 5 minutes?
just a minute
A
or
minute?
so.
Okay,
It
I
doesn't
can do
have
a
to be
minute.
that long.
All right.
Favorite module right now, quick. Kyle, you're up.
Um, I really like. This is a weird one. I'm a really big fan of the muffin mix. It's really not that exciting a module, but it's got 4 channels of 100 times gain in a little mixer. It's so dumb, but it's a lot of fun. The
That's
other one is
cool.
the 2 HP freeze. I really like the 2 HP freeze for
Let's
weird
see.
stuff.
Mine. Yeah, I mean it's always a tie between the MS-20 filter and the microcosmo is basically like an ears module or a
Mm.
microphony module with the door stopper on it because it's so much fun as a modulator.
You've got like a spring thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Um, I mean, it was perfectly designed. Like it has a screw right in the middle of like the scratch plate on the front that holds the PCB on the back, and all I did was like use that screw to put a door stopper on, and it just looks it's great.
Yeah. A contact mic module everyone should have as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what it
Oh,
is.
I
It's a
want that.
contact
I
mic
need that.
module.
You can DIY microphone is like really cheap for
Yeah,
the DIY kit. It's like under 50 quid, I think.
yeah,
Super
it's
super cheap.
it's super yeah, and it's one of the most fun things you can do. Like if you
Yeah,
have any sort of like if there's a lawnmower going outside or something, like put a microphone into it. Like
yeah,
you can use all sorts of things into it, but it also just has a nice scratch plate which you can use as triggers and
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Big BHB is also great. Get one of those.
Yep.
Ask for one for Christmas. Good Christmas
Yep.
present for any modular people.
I have a really
Um,
hard time picking a favorite. I think the model I have the most fun with currently is the Moskva sequencer. It's surprisingly fun to work with. Um, yeah, I think that must be my favorite right now. It's not gonna be my favorite forever, but it is right now.
That's awesome. Uh, I like that you like your sequencer.
Yeah.
Hey, Device X, you're just catching the end. Ising's about to play us out, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, want me to just start?
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks for watching, y'all. If you want to be on, just send me a DM and on Discord, and we'll make it happen next week, same time. Ooh.